I only stayed with you because I feared loneliness. You were just my safety net, she admitted at our Valentine's Day celebration. The words still echo in my head 6 months later, delivered with surgical precision over candlelit dinner at the exact restaurant where I'd proposed 12 years earlier. What started as my carefully planned romantic gesture became the moment my wife Monica finally told me the truth about our entire marriage. I'm Kevin, 34, a financial advisor here in Tampa, and I've always been the type of guy who believes in doing things right. Growing up watching my parents celebrate 43 years together taught me that relationships require investment, attention to detail, and genuine effort. So when Monica started attending those intensive life transformation workshops, 4 evenings a week with her spiritual mentor Derek, I attributed her growing distance to stress from her real estate agency's recent expansion into the competitive West Shore market. She'd come home energized but emotionally detached, constantly discussing breakthrough realizations about living authentically and discovering her true self, while I worked overtime finalizing a major investment deal with Sunshine Coast Development that would secure our financial future. 4 weeks, I'd been secretly planning our Valentine's celebration down to every detail: reservations at Oystercatchers, the upscale waterfront restaurant in downtown Tampa's Channelside district where we'd had our first anniversary dinner, complete with the same corner table overlooking the bay. I'd arranged for a surprise delivery of white orchids, her favorite flowers, and spent 3 months coordinating with a local jeweler to create a custom necklace featuring our anniversary date in delicate script, something meaningful to commemorate our journey together. I even booked a surprise weekend getaway to Key West, the same place we'd honeymooned, thinking a return to where our love story began might reconnect us. Monica had been so absorbed in Derek's teachings about authentic living and breaking free from societal expectations that our conversations had become surface-level exchanges about schedules and logistics, but I convinced myself this romantic gesture would remind her why we'd fallen in love in the first place. While she explored whatever spiritual awakening Derek was facilitating, I was working 60-hour weeks to afford the luxury resort and sunset sailing excursion I'd been saving for months, never imagining that her journey toward authenticity would lead to the complete destruction of everything we'd built together. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was planning our most romantic Valentine's Day ever, complete with champagne service and a violinist I'd hired to play her favorite song during dessert, Monica was apparently discovering that our entire 12-year marriage had been built on her fear of solitude rather than genuine love. I'd meticulously coordinated every aspect of the evening, from the timing of the orchid delivery to ensuring our server knew about the custom necklace presentation, all while Monica attended Derek's workshops that were supposedly helping her break through emotional barriers and embrace her authentic desires. The morning of Valentine's Day, I woke up early to confirm all the arrangements one final time, double-checking the resort reservations in Key West and reviewing the itinerary I'd printed out as a surprise gift, completely oblivious that I was about to discover the woman I'd devoted my adult life to had been emotionally checked out for years. As I straightened my tie that evening and grabbed the small wrapped box containing the anniversary necklace, I felt genuine excitement about reconnecting with Monica and celebrating the foundation we'd built together, having no idea that foundation had been nothing more than her desperate attempt to avoid facing life alone. The 3-course meal I'd pre-ordered featured all her favorites: seared grouper with mango salsa, the restaurant's signature key lime pie, and that expensive Sancerre she'd mentioned loving during a wine tasting we'd attended the previous fall, while the weekend getaway included couples massage appointments and dinner reservations at the same oceanfront restaurant where we'd promised to love each other forever 12 years earlier. The evening started perfectly, with Monica looking stunning in the navy dress I'd complimented countless times, but something felt off from the moment we sat down at our candlelit table overlooking Tampa Bay. She kept checking her phone despite my gentle requests to focus on us, barely acknowledging the elaborate orchid arrangement that had cost me $400, and picking at her lobster thermidor like it was cafeteria food instead of the delicacy she'd raved about during our anniversary dinner 3 years prior. When I attempted to reminisce about our early years together, talking about how we dreamed of building a life in Tampa while sitting in this exact spot as broke newlyweds, Monica's eyes glazed over with the same distant expression she'd worn for months. I raised my champagne glass for what I hoped would be a meaningful toast celebrating our journey together, the words, "To 12 incredible years and many more adventures ahead," barely leaving my lips before Monica stopped me mid-sentence with a pained expression that made my stomach drop. "Kevin, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she set down her untouched glass, and I knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next would change everything between us forever. The confession that followed hit me like a physical blow, delivered with the clinical precision of someone who'd been rehearsing these words for weeks under Derek's guidance. "I never truly loved you," Monica said, her eyes focused on the flickering candle between us rather than my face. "I stayed because I was terrified of being alone, and Derek helped me realize I've been living a lie our entire marriage." She explained that what I'd interpreted as love and partnership had actually been her using me as an emotional safety net, a term she repeated multiple times like Derek had drilled it into her vocabulary during their intensive sessions. Monica credited her spiritual mentor with giving her the courage to finally speak her truth, describing how his workshops had revealed that she'd been performing the role of a devoted wife while secretly resenting our relationship and feeling trapped by expectations she'd never actually wanted to fulfill. "Derek says authentic living requires brutal honesty," she continued, finally meeting my eyes with something that looked almost like relief. "And the truth is I've been pretending to be happy for years while feeling dead inside every time you planned another romantic gesture or talked about our future together." The woman sitting across from me, explaining how every anniversary dinner and vacation I'd carefully planned had felt like prison sentence rather than celebration, was a complete stranger wearing Monica's face and speaking words that Derek had obviously planted in her mind during months of manipulation disguised as spiritual awakening. As Monica continued her devastating monologue, describing how she'd fantasized about a different life while lying next to me every night for the past several years, I found myself studying her face for any trace of the woman I'd married, the one who used to light up when I surprised her with small gestures or spontaneous weekend trips to places like Sanibel Island or St. Augustine. "Every time you'd plan something romantic, I felt suffocated," she admitted, her voice gaining strength as she destroyed what remained of my understanding of our relationship. "Derek helped me see that I was betraying myself by pretending to appreciate gestures that felt more like obligations than expressions of love." The irony of her timing wasn't lost on me. Here she was, delivering the most authentically cruel speech of our marriage while I sat surrounded by the evidence of months of careful planning, the custom necklace still hidden in my jacket pocket next to the printed itinerary for our Key West getaway that would never happen now. What happened next surprised even me. Instead of anger or desperate pleading, I felt an odd sense of clarity wash over me as I calmly signaled our server and asked for the check. Monica seemed genuinely startled by my composed reaction, probably expecting tears or arguments or some dramatic scene that would validate her narrative about our suffocating relationship, but I simply pulled out my credit card and paid the $450 bill without saying a word. The 30-minute drive back to our waterfront condo in South Tampa passed in complete silence, Monica occasionally glancing at me like she was waiting for an emotional explosion that never came, while I mentally cataloged everything I needed to handle in the coming hours. The moment we walked through the front door of our home, I headed straight to our bedroom and began methodically packing essentials: 3 days' worth of clothes, important documents from my home office, laptop and chargers, toiletries, and the few personal items that actually mattered to me. Monica followed me around frantically, trying to initiate some kind of discussion about our future, asking questions like, "What are you doing?" and "Can't we talk about this?" while I systematically gathered everything I'd need for an extended stay away from what was apparently never really our home together. I moved through our condo with the efficiency of someone executing a well-rehearsed emergency plan, stopping at my desk to update passwords for our shared financial accounts and transfer funds to my personal checking account before loading my belongings into my BMW with the same calm precision I used to manage my clients' portfolios during market volatility. "Kevin, please just stop and talk to me," Monica pleaded as I carried my laptop bag and overnight suitcase toward the garage, her voice taking on a panicked edge that suggested Derek's workshops hadn't prepared her for this particular scenario. I paused at the door leading to the garage and turned to look at her one final time, this woman who just admitted that our entire marriage had been an elaborate performance designed to avoid facing life alone, and felt absolutely nothing except a strange sense of relief that the pretense was finally over. "There's nothing left to discuss," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "You've been living a lie for 12 years, and I'm not interested in being part of that performance anymore." After booking a suite at the Grand Hyatt downtown using my phone while sitting in the hotel parking garage, I experienced something I hadn't felt in months, genuine peace instead of the constant low-level anxiety that had become my normal state during Monica's transformation under Derek's influence. For the first time in our 12-year relationship, I understood why connection had always felt like I was working twice as hard to maintain emotional intimacy with someone who was perpetually unavailable, why conversations about our future had felt forced rather than exciting, and why Monica's responses to my romantic gestures had seemed more obligatory than appreciative. The revelation that our entire marriage had been Monica's elaborate coping mechanism for avoiding solitude actually explained years of subtle disconnection that I'd attributed to work stress or normal relationship challenges, and sitting alone in that hotel suite with my hastily packed belongings, I felt more authentic peace than I'd experienced in our supposedly loving home for months. The next morning, I contacted Patricia Hernandez, Tampa's premier family law attorney whose reputation for handling high-profile divorces with both discretion and speed made her worth every penny of her substantial retainer fee. Patricia's downtown office overlooked the same bay where Monica had destroyed our marriage the night before, and I found a certain poetic justice in planning my legal strategy while staring at the restaurant where my illusions had finally died. I arrived prepared with comprehensive financial records I'd organized over the weekend, bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, and a detailed timeline of Monica's transformation under Derek's influence that I'd compiled with the same analytical precision I used for client presentations. "This Derek character concerns me," Patricia said after reviewing my documentation, her sharp eyes narrowing as she studied the pattern of Monica's workshop payments and behavioral changes. Spiritual mentors who isolate people from their support systems and demand substantial financial commitments often have questionable motives beyond enlightenment. Patricia's investigation moved faster than I'd expected, with her private investigator uncovering disturbing information about Derek's background within 72 hours that made Monica's betrayal seem almost secondary to the larger fraud she'd become entangled in. The report revealed that Derek Williams was actually David Walsh, a charismatic con artist with fabricated credentials who'd been operating similar soul liberation intensive programs in Jacksonville, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale over the past 3 years, targeting emotionally vulnerable women during major life transitions like divorce, career changes, or relationship struggles. His elaborate scheme involved creating artificial spiritual communities where he positioned himself as an enlightened guru while systematically draining participants' savings through increasingly expensive workshop levels, private coaching sessions, and retreat programs that promised profound transformation but delivered only financial ruin and psychological manipulation. Patricia's investigator discovered that Monica had drained our joint savings account of $85,000 to pay for Derek's exclusive programs, money I'd been setting aside for our future home purchase and retirement planning, while simultaneously quitting her lucrative real estate career to focus on what Derek called spiritual awakening work that generated no income whatsoever. The most devastating revelation came when Derek suddenly vanished from Tampa with approximately $400,000 stolen from 10 different women, leaving behind a trail of destroyed marriages, depleted bank accounts, and emotionally shattered victims who'd believed his promises about authentic living and spiritual enlightenment. Monica's sister Lisa, a private investigator who'd been suspicious of Derek from the beginning, called me personally to explain how the scam had unraveled and to inform me that Monica was suffering a complete emotional and financial collapse after realizing she'd destroyed her marriage for a manipulative predator who'd never cared about her spiritual development. "She's staying at my house and barely functional," Lisa explained during our phone conversation, her voice heavy with concern and anger. "Derek convinced her that you were holding her back from her true potential, and now she understands that he was just using her psychological vulnerabilities to steal her money and destroy her relationships." The irony was staggering. Monica had traded our genuine 12-year partnership for a fraudulent spiritual awakening that left her emotionally devastated, financially ruined, and completely alone in exactly the way she'd always feared most. Within a week of Derek's disappearance, Patricia had filed all the necessary divorce paperwork while simultaneously helping Monica's victims organize a class action lawsuit against the vanished con artist, though recovering their stolen money seemed unlikely given that Derek had apparently fled the country using falsified travel documents. "Your wife was a victim too," Patricia reminded me during one of our strategy sessions, though I found it difficult to summon much sympathy for someone who'd chosen to destroy our marriage based on the advice of a charlatan rather than communicating with her actual husband about whatever dissatisfaction she'd been harboring for years. For months after finalizing our divorce, I transformed my life so completely that the man who desperately planned romantic gestures for an emotionally unavailable wife felt like a stranger from someone else's past. I purchased a modern penthouse in Tampa's Hyde Park district with stunning bay views, 3 bedrooms that I converted into a home office, library, and guest suite, and furnished the entire space according to my personal taste rather than years of careful compromises designed to accommodate Monica's ever-changing preferences. The relief of making decisions based solely on what I actually enjoyed, dark leather furniture, minimalist artwork, a sound system for the jazz collection Monica had always dismissed as boring, felt like discovering parts of myself that had been buried under a decade of relationship maintenance. My financial advisory practice experienced unprecedented growth as word spread about my professionalism during personal crisis, attracting 4 major clients including Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a biotech company founder who specifically sought my services after hearing how I'd handled my divorce with quiet dignity rather than dramatic public meltdowns. I need someone who can maintain perspective during turbulent times, Dr. Martinez explained during our initial consultation, and your reputation for staying calm under pressure is exactly what my company needs in a financial advisor. The irony wasn't lost on me that Monica's betrayal had inadvertently enhanced my professional reputation and opened doors I never would have walked through while I was busy trying to save a marriage that had never actually existed. I adopted Ranger, a loyal Labrador mix from the Humane Society whose previous owners had abandoned him for being too active, and discovered that coming home to genuine excitement and unconditional affection felt infinitely better than the polite indifference I'd grown accustomed to with Monica. Ranger accompanied me on weekend fishing trips to the Florida Keys that I'd always wanted to try but Monica had dismissed as boring, and I found peace in the quiet hours on the water that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Florida's natural beauty in the first place. My new routine included morning runs along Bayshore Boulevard with Ranger, evening sailing lessons at the Tampa Yacht Club, and weekend trips to places like Tarpon Springs and Cedar Key where I could explore my interests without constantly calculating whether Monica would enjoy the experience or complain about the accommodations. The freedom to plan activities based on my genuine interests rather than someone else's approval felt revolutionary after 12 years of relationship negotiations that always seemed to end with me adjusting my preferences to match hers. I'd started taking photography classes at the University of South Florida, something I'd mentioned wanting to do years ago before Monica dismissed it as an expensive hobby that would take time away from our relationship, and discovered I had a natural talent for capturing Florida's coastal landscapes during my weekend adventures with Ranger. My social circle expanded to include people who shared my actual interests, fellow sailing enthusiasts, other dog owners from the Hyde Park area, and photography classmates who appreciated my analytical approach to composition and lighting. For the first time since college, I felt like I was building friendships based on genuine compatibility rather than couple-centered social obligations that had always revolved around Monica's need to be the center of attention at every gathering. The most surprising discovery was how much energy I'd been unconsciously expending on managing Monica's moods and preferences, energy that I now channeled into personal growth and professional excellence that brought genuine satisfaction rather than the exhausting treadmill of trying to please someone who was fundamentally unhappy with herself. 6 months post-divorce, Monica launched an aggressive reconciliation campaign that started with apologetic text messages arriving at all hours, each one more desperate than the last as she described her profound regret and claimed to be in legitimate therapy to address the psychological vulnerabilities that Derek had exploited. "I know I destroyed everything good between us," read one typical message, "but I'm finally seeing a real therapist who's helping me understand how Derek manipulated my fear of abandonment to turn me against the one person who actually loved me." The texts escalated to handwritten letters delivered to my office building where she poured out pages of analysis about her childhood trauma, her pattern of self-sabotage, and her newfound commitment to becoming the partner I'd always deserved, each letter more psychologically sophisticated than anything Monica had ever expressed during our actual marriage. The harassment intensified when Monica began appearing outside Armature Works, my favorite coffee shop, and LA Fitness downtown, staging pathetic encounters while dressed in outfits I'd complimented years earlier and carrying peace offerings like my favorite key lime pastries from Wright's Gourmet or white orchids that reminded me of our ruined Valentine's dinner. I just happened to be in the neighborhood, she'd say with forced casualness while obviously having researched my daily routine, and I thought you might want these croissants from that bakery you used to love. Monica enlisted our mutual friends in her campaign, with couples like Tom and Jennifer hosting dinner parties that were obviously designed as reconciliation interventions, where they'd spend the evening praising Monica's transformation and suggesting that everyone deserves a second chance after temporary confusion. She's been through hell, Jennifer would say while serving dessert, and she's finally dealing with the emotional issues that made her vulnerable to that con artist's manipulation. Even my own brother called from Ohio to suggest that Monica deserved consideration after her spiritual crisis, apparently having received carefully crafted phone calls where she positioned herself as a victim who'd learned valuable lessons about authentic love versus manipulative control. The most pathetic incident occurred when Monica somehow convinced Dr. Martinez's receptionist to schedule a fake consultation, showing up at my office in tears with a folder of what she claimed were therapy homework assignments proving her commitment to personal growth. My therapist says I need to make direct amends to the people I've hurt, Monica explained while my assistant looked on in horror, and she thinks face-to-face communication is essential for genuine healing and accountability. I had security escort her out while she continued explaining her newfound understanding of emotional intimacy and authentic partnership, her voice echoing through the hallway as she promised to wait however long it took for me to recognize her transformation. The final confrontation occurred on a Tuesday evening when Monica interrupted my romantic dinner with Elena, a marine biologist I'd been dating for 3 weeks, by walking into the same waterfront restaurant where she'd originally destroyed our marriage and declaring her love loudly enough for the entire dining room to hear. "Kevin, I know you're here," Monica announced, her voice carrying across the restaurant as other diners turned to stare, "and I need you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." Elena looked genuinely shocked as Monica approached our table with tears streaming down her face, launching into a desperate monologue about how Derek had brainwashed her into believing that security and genuine care were forms of emotional prison when they were actually the foundation of real love. "I was confused and scared and stupid," Monica continued, ignoring Elena's presence entirely, "but I understand now that what we had was precious and rare, and I'm begging you to give me another chance to prove that I can be the wife you always needed." The entire scene was so dramatically inappropriate that the restaurant manager approached our table, and Monica was ultimately escorted out by security while continuing to shout about soul mates and second chances, leaving Elena and me sitting in stunned silence surrounded by the curious stares of other diners who'd witnessed the complete meltdown. 10 months later, Elena and I were happily planning our engagement while sailing my new catamaran through Tampa Bay on a perfect Saturday afternoon, discussing our shared dreams of exploring the Caribbean together during the winter months when her research schedule would allow extended travel. The contrast between planning a future with someone who genuinely wanted to build something together versus my years of trying to convince Monica to appreciate experiences she fundamentally didn't value felt like the difference between swimming with the current and fighting against it constantly. Elena's enthusiasm for our weekend sailing adventures, her genuine interest in my photography projects, and her easy laughter when Ranger inevitably tried to help her with marine biology research made me understand what partnership was supposed to feel like when both people actually wanted to be there. Monica's harassment had continued sporadically through fake social media accounts and different phone numbers, sending messages that alternated between desperate pleas about her continued therapy progress and angry accusations that I was being vindictive by refusing to acknowledge her transformation into someone worthy of forgiveness. "I've changed everything about myself," read one typical message. "I'm working 2 jobs to pay off the debt Derek left me with, I'm in therapy twice a week, and I've learned to appreciate all the things you used to do for me that I took for granted, but you're too stubborn and bitter to give me credit for genuine growth." I felt complete indifference toward Monica's continued attempts at contact, having realized that her confession about our marriage being built on fear rather than love was actually the greatest gift she could have given me by freeing me to find genuine partnership with someone who chose me every day rather than settling for me as an alternative to solitude. Elena, with her practical wisdom about marine ecosystems and her genuine affection for my analytical nature, represented everything I had been missing in my marriage. Authentic partnership where both people contributed equally, shared interests that enhanced rather than depleted each other's energy, and the kind of easy communication that made even mundane decisions about weekend plans feel collaborative rather than adversarial. I love how you think through everything so carefully, Elena told me one evening as we planned our engagement party. Monica must have been crazy to take that for granted, but her loss is definitely my gain. The irony wasn't lost on me that Monica's desperate attempts to convince me of her transformation only highlighted how fundamentally different Elena and I were as a couple. Where Monica had needed constant reassurance and validation, Elena brought her own confidence and emotional stability to our relationship. Where Monica had demanded expensive gestures and dramatic displays of affection, Elena appreciated thoughtful planning and quiet moments together, and where Monica had used guilt and manipulation to get her way, Elena approached disagreements with direct communication and genuine compromise that strengthened rather than drained our connection. Last month, while Elena and I were shopping for engagement rings at Hyde Park Village, we ran into Lisa, Monica's sister, who looked genuinely surprised to see how happy and peaceful I appeared compared to the stressed, exhausted man I'd been during the final months of my marriage. "Monica still talks about you constantly," Lisa admitted with obvious discomfort. "She's convinced that if she just finds the right therapist or the perfect apology, you'll realize that you belong together, but honestly, seeing you now, I think you dodged a bullet." Elena squeezed my hand as Lisa continued, explaining that Monica had been cycling through various self-improvement programs and romantic strategies, each one more desperate than the last, while I had simply moved forward with someone who appreciated the same quiet stability that Monica had found suffocating.